The cracked shield had been useless for 11 years. I locked its rim between two wooden jaws, pushed a cold chisel beneath the final copper rivet, and struck once. The rivet squealed. Rust sprayed across my gloves. The shield boss dropped onto the bench, and the split oak layers relaxed like a hand finally opening. Something cold flowed from the shield into my fingers. The weakness left in its broken wood vanished. The strength that remained entered me. A stack of iron shoulder plates slipped from the shelf above my head. I raised one arm. The plates struck hard enough to break the bench, yet my bones held. A quiet voice spoke inside my mind. The ruined shield had surrendered its preserved property. Permanent physical protection had increased. I stared at the dent in the floor. Then I looked at the mountain of broken armor surrounding me. 3 days earlier, I had stood beneath the crystal dome of Reincarnation Academy while 200 students awakened their classes.
Lena Vale, the best swordswoman in our year, received Moonblade Adept. The crystal projected silver swords over the entire hall. A noble boy named Darren awakened Stormlancer. Another student became a Dragon Shield Guardian. Even the baker's son received Battle Cook, which sounded ridiculous until the instructors explained that his meals could restore stamina during combat. When my turn came, the crystal turned gray. No weapon appeared. No elemental symbol burned above my head. A faint image resembling a bent sorting hook flickered inside the crystal, then disappeared. Examiner Holt checked the device twice. "Useful combat potential is undetected," he announced. "Manual support assignment." Nobody needed to insult me. The silence did the work. Reincarnation Academy trained people to fight monsters, protect cities, and explore ruins. Manual support students repaired roads, carried targets, cleaned training grounds, and sorted damaged equipment. By sunset, I had been given a canvas coat, a pair of thick gloves, and a destination no student wanted. The Western Salvage Yard stood behind the Academy Forge. Generations of students called it the Graveyard. Broken spears filled roofed racks. Crushed helmets lay in heaps. Burned staffs had been thrown into stone bins to prevent their remaining mana from starting fires. Beneath them were cracked ward plates, failed alchemy tools, torn monster saddles, shattered practice golems, and the remains of artifacts too expensive to repair. Quartermaster Oren met me beside a leaning shed. He had one eye, 2 iron fingers, and no patience. "You sort repairable items onto green pallets," he said. "Reusable material goes onto blue pallets, dangerous residue goes into red bins, absolute rubbish goes down the chute." He handed me a sorting hook. The iron shaft was longer than my arm. Its tip had been flattened for prying and curved for pulling objects out of unstable piles.
"What happens down the chute?" I asked. "It becomes tomorrow's problem." The chute led into darkness beneath the yard. Oren pointed toward a blocked lane between the armor heaps. "Clear that before the end of the week. The fire inspector wants access to the western wall." The lane was buried under more metal than I could move in a month. "Do I get help?" "You have a hook." He left me with that comforting thought. My first day taught me why salvage work ruined backs and fingers. Armor never stacked neatly. A breastplate wedged beneath a wheel could hold up half a pile. A harmless-looking helmet could contain a live illusion rune. Rusted edges were often sharper than proper blades. I learned to test weight before pulling. I learned to listen for shifting metal. Most importantly, I learned that broken did not mean useless. A bent spearhead could be heated and straightened. Torn leather straps could become washers. Damaged buckles were still buckles. Oren's colored palettes forced me to decide what each object could become next. That evening, I found the shield. Its oak body had split from rim to center. 3 copper bands were torn. The boss had folded inward. Someone had painted a white disposal mark across the front. I placed it on a green pallet at first. A shield could be repaired. Then I pressed the center. The split widened through every layer. The inner binding had rotted, and the protection rune beneath the boss had fused into black glass. Repairing it would cost more wood and metal than making a new shield, and the original rune path no longer existed. When I moved it toward the rubbish chute, a pale line appeared across my vision. The item had completely lost its primary function. A stable property remained. Controlled dismantling could preserve that property. I dropped the shield. The line disappeared. I picked it up again. It returned. There was no menu, no explanation, and no helpful picture showing where to cut. When I tried a dented but usable helmet, nothing happened. A snapped spear shaft produced no line because the iron head could still stab. A rusted gauntlet was truly ruined, but nothing stable remained inside it. The shield was different. It could no longer protect anyone, yet some part of its old protection still survived. I carried it into the shed and lit an oil lamp. My first idea was to smash the shield apart. That was how most scrap workers separated wood from metal. The pale line turned red the moment I lifted the hammer. I lowered it. The property would survive only if I dismantled the object without destroying the part that held its final value. The system could show me that a possibility existed. It would not tell me how to reach it. I examined the shield properly. The center had failed, but the outer copper band was still under tension. The black glass beneath the boss gave off a faint warmth. If I struck the wrong rivet first, the band might spring loose. If I broke the glass, I would probably lose whatever the system had detected. I cleaned the rust from each rivet with a wire brush. I braced the rim between blocks. I used a narrow punch instead of the splitting hammer and removed the leather loops first. The third rivet refused to move. I heated it with the lamp, added oil, and tried again. The punch slipped. My knuckles hit the rim, and the copper band snapped outward. It cut through my glove and opened a bright line across my hand. I nearly threw the shield into the chute. Instead, I wrapped the cut, found a thicker block, and changed the angle of the brace. The remaining tension pushed into the bench instead of my face. After midnight, only the boss remained. The moment it separated, the cold strength entered my body. The system did not heal my hand. It did not repair the bench after the falling armor plates smashed one leg. It only gave me the shield's surviving protection because I had completed the work. A second message followed. A discarded object had received its final useful purpose through my labor. The hidden class Celestial Recycler had awakened. I waited for tools to appear or secret knowledge to fill my head. Nothing happened. My injured hand still hurt. The broken bench remained broken. The mountain outside had not become smaller. The class had recognized my profession. It had not agreed to perform it for me. By morning, I had learned the rule. An object had to be completely incapable of performing its original purpose. I had to dismantle it by hand through a process I controlled. If I preserved its final stable property until the last meaningful connection was separated, that property became mine permanently. There were limits. Repairable items gave me nothing. Empty junk gave me nothing. Breaking an object carelessly destroyed the property. My body also had to accept what entered it. The shield's protection had left me exhausted and thirsty, as if I had carried stones all night. The material was not free either. Once a property transferred, the original object lost it. I could still sort its copper, oak, leather, and glass, but nobody could restore the old shield afterward. I wrote those facts in a ledger. Then I repaired the bench. I replaced the broken leg with a section of spear shaft, cut a flat face with a rasp, and bound it with one of the shield's copper strips. It was not beautiful, but it stood level. That small repair gave me an idea for the blocked lane. The armor heap could not be cleared by lifting everything from the top. Several heavy breastplates had collapsed over a broken equipment cart. If I recovered the cart, I could move 5 times as much material. If I pulled the wrong plate, however, the whole slope would slide against the western wall. I spent the morning probing gaps with my sorting hook.
I tied strips of red cloth around load-bearing pieces. I used the shield's oak panels as skids and laid them beneath the cart wheels. The front axle had snapped. I found a practice spear with a straight ash shaft and an iron sleeve from a ruined banner stand. I shaved the wood until the sleeve fit tightly, drove it through the wheel hubs, and pinned both ends with copper rivets. When I pulled the cart free, a tower of helmets shifted above me. Before gaining the shield's protection, I would have jumped backward and allowed the cart to roll into the wall. Instead, I planted my shoulder against its side and guided it along the oak skids while helmets crashed around my boots. The permanent protection did not make me invincible. The weight bruised my shoulder and drove me to one knee. But my bones held long enough for the cart to clear the slope. By sunset, I had opened a narrow path through the lane. By the following night, the path reached the western wall. I sorted every object I moved. Repairable armor went onto green pallets. Good iron, leather, and wood went onto blue. Residue went into sealed red bins. Only objects with no remaining use entered the chute. The graveyard changed around me. It was still enormous, but one safe corridor now crossed its western side. The recovered cart stood beneath a new shelter made from bent spear shafts and sections of cracked tower shields. Oren could reach the fire cistern for the first time in years. He walked the path twice, testing my braces with his iron fingers. "You used disposal material to repair the disposal equipment," he said. "It seemed appropriate. It seems cheap." "That too." His mouth moved slightly. I decided it was the closest he came to smiling. He signed the fire inspection sheet and gave me a better cold chisel from the locked tool cabinet. That night, I returned to the shed and examined the next promising object. It was a mage's staff burned almost from end to end. Its silver wood shaft had become charcoal. The focusing crystal was cloudy. A normal mage could not channel a spark through it. The system confirmed that its primary function was gone. A great amount of stored mana remained. I touched the first copper winding with my chisel. Blue fire crawled across the black wood. The staff was eligible. It was also waiting for one careless cut to explode. Episode 2. I was still considering whether permanent mana was worth losing my eyebrows when someone kicked open the shed door. The girl carried a forge hammer in one hand and a bucket of sand in the other. Soot darkened her cheek, and her red braid had been wrapped in wire to keep it away from flames. "Do not touch that winding," she said. My chisel was already touching it. I froze. She poured sand across the staff. The blue flame disappeared beneath the grains, though a low hum continued inside the bucket. "That coil carries heat toward the crystal," she said. "If you break it while the char is exposed to air, the stored mana will follow the copper into your hand." I slowly withdrew the chisel. "You could have started with hello. You could have started with not exploding." Her name was Mira Cole. She was a first-year forge student, and unlike most combat students, she chose to spend her free hours in the academy smithy. Her awakened class was Ember Smith. It let her judge temperature accurately, but it did not swing the hammer for her. She had come to the graveyard looking for sky copper. "The forge master ordered a new heat cage," she explained. "The academy stores will sell us clean copper at triple price. Burned mage tools often contain sky copper coils, but the yard workers throw them into mixed metal." I showed her Oren's blue pallets. "Not this yard worker." She inspected my labels, then lifted the staff's sand-covered end. "You separated high-carbon steel from soft iron?" "The soft iron bends before it cracks." "And you kept silverwood ash away from common charcoal?" "It irritates mana channels." Mira looked at me with sudden interest. "Who taught you?" "Objects that tried to injure me." "Those are strict teachers." She needed the staff's copper. I needed the property inside it. We agreed to work together. Mira identified 3 separate dangers:
The burned silver wood could ignite when exposed to mana. The cloudy crystal still held pressure. The copper winding tightened as it cooled, so cutting it at the wrong point would crush the fragile channel beneath it. We built a dismantling cradle from 2 ceramic roof tiles, a broken vise, and wet clay. The staff rested above a trough of sand. Mira heated one section at a time with a forge pencil while I unwound the copper using wooden pegs. The first turn came loose cleanly. The second tore away a strip of charcoal. Blue light flashed through the crack. The clay beneath the staff began to steam. "Too fast," Mira said. "The coil was already moving."
You pulled against its twist.
I pulled away from the fire. The fire does not care about your feelings. We stopped and let the staff cool. Mira showed me how the winding had been laid. Each turn overlapped the previous one from left to right. Pulling straight caused the copper to tighten around the shaft. Rotating the staff while keeping the coil still allowed it to open without scraping the wood. I adjusted the cradle so the staff could roll. Mira held the copper with tongs. We unwound another turn, then another. The work took most of the night. At the crystal end, the silver wood had fused around a ring of blue glass. We could not cut the glass without releasing the mana property. We had to remove the charcoal in thin layers. I used a small cabinet scraper. Each stroke produced glowing black dust. Mira caught it on a damp iron tray before it could ignite. The staff hummed more loudly as the ring emerged. My fingers began to tremble. "Stop," Mira said. "We are almost through." That is what people say immediately before breaking expensive things. She was right. The scraper had heated, and its edge was pulling instead of cutting. I sharpened it on a stone and waited until my hand steadied. When the final layer came away, Mira lowered the blue glass ring into the sand. I separated the cracked focusing crystal from its bronze socket. The stored mana entered me like cold water poured into my chest. Every lamp in the shed flared. For one terrible second, the new energy had nowhere to go. My muscles locked. The scraper fell from my hand. Mira grabbed the staff's loose copper and pressed it against the iron bench. The excess charge flowed through the coil with a sharp blue snap. I collapsed onto a stool. "You did absorb it," she whispered. I looked up. "You saw that?" "I saw a dead staff become completely empty while you lit 6 lamps without touching them." The system had not told me how to hide the result. I explained the rule.
Not every detail at first, but enough to make the danger clear. Mira tested it immediately. She brought a cracked forge hammer from her bag. The face was chipped, but the handle and one striking edge still worked. The system showed nothing. "Repairable," I said. She nodded with approval. "Good." "Good?" If you could gain properties by destroying usable tools, you would eventually start calling every loose handle irreparable. I disliked how quickly she understood the temptation. We tested a warped breastplate next. Its impact rune remained strong, but the plate could be reshaped. It gave me nothing. A pair of burned casting gloves had lost every finger and could no longer protect a smith's hands. One glove held no stable property. The other gave me a tiny resistance to heat after I cut its seams, removed the wire mesh, and separated the final rune patch intact. That difference mattered. Objects of the same type did not guarantee the same result. I had to inspect each one.
The system revealed the possibility only when I touched the object and considered dismantling it. It did not identify hidden cracks, chemical residue, or the safest method. Mira could often see those before I could. She became my first client before sunrise. She marked 7 ruined forge tools from the red bins. In exchange for my work, I could receive whatever properties survived. She would take the separated alloys and ceramic parts. Our first batch was terrible. I mixed 2 grades of bronze because they looked identical beneath the soot. Mira forged test hooks from both piles. One hook bent smoothly, the other cracked at the neck and flew across the smithy. She made me file a bright window into every piece before sorting it. Yellow bronze produced short curls. The harder alloy produced fine chips. After that, our recovered metal became consistent enough for her heat gauge. Quality changed the way Oren treated the yard. Before, the blue pallets were sold by weight. Buyers assumed every barrel contained rust, mixed alloys, and hidden curse damage. Once Mira and I separated the material by composition and recorded its source, the Academy Forge paid twice the old rate. Oren gave me shelves. I built them along the shed's drywall. Fully repairable objects stayed outside my work area. Empty materials went into marked boxes. Property-bearing ruins waited on separate trays, with enough distance between them to prevent mana residue from interacting. That last rule came from a mistake. I placed a frost-buckled boot beside a burned salamander bracer. By morning, the boot had thawed, the bracer had cooled, and both properties had weakened. I still gained a little cold resistance from the boot, but the bracer gave me nothing. Lost value had a smell. In this case, it smelled like wet leather and disappointment. Over the next 5 days, the graveyard became my classroom. A shattered messenger anklet gave me a slight increase in running endurance, but only after I removed every silver link without bending the root rune. A crushed mining helmet improved my sense of balance. I had to drill out the lamp bracket, peel back the liner, and lift the cracked stability plate without snapping it. A monster handler's torn glove gave me grip strength. A ruined water charm let me hold my breath longer. 3 broken shield clasps added tiny pieces of resistance that together mattered less than the first shield, but they never faded. Most items gave me nothing dramatic. That was fine. 100 small, permanent gains changed how long I could work. I carried full scrap boxes without stopping. I felt heat before it burned me. I noticed when a loaded cart leaned half a finger too far. The improvements came from objects, but useful progress came from repetition. My cleaner cuts preserved more properties. My labels became more accurate. My hands stopped reaching into unstable gaps before my eyes had found the load-bearing piece. Mira worked beside me whenever the forge released her. She established a 3-color chalk test for dangerous items. White meant ordinary material. Blue meant active mana. Black meant an unknown reaction and required a separate tray. She also discovered a hairline crack in my new chisel before it broke. "You strike slightly to the right," she said. "I do not." She placed the chisel on the bench. One side of the head had mushroomed more than the other. I began striking straighter. Our first large commission came from the Academy's ward keeper. 6 lightning rods on the eastern roof had burned out during a storm. New sky copper would take a month to arrive. Mira's heat cage required only half the coil from the staff, so she offered the rest. The keeper did not trust salvage material. Mira forged 2 sample rods, one from ordinary mixed copper and one from our separated sky copper. He sent the same charge through both. The mixed rod became red and bent. Our rod carried the charge into the ground while remaining straight. He ordered 6. My role was not to forge them. I recovered and prepared the material. I dismantled burned staffs, cracked conductor plates, and a lightning cage that had melted into a solid knot. I cut away common copper, scraped contaminated surfaces, and tested every section for hidden heat fractures. One coil appeared perfect, but Mira found green powder beneath its inner edge. "Acid flux," she said. "If we use this, rain will eat through it." We lost nearly a quarter of our expected material. The deadline did not change. I searched the lower racks and found 2 broken Stormlance heads. Their blades were ruined, and their weapon channels had fused, but narrow sky copper veins still ran beneath the steel. Separating them required sawing along both sides of each vein without cutting into the copper. The steel screeched against my blade. Blue sparks burned holes in my sleeves. When the final strip came free, the lance surrendered a small resistance to electrical shock.
The copper remained for Mira. We finished the rods before the next storm. I helped install the final one because the roof-keeper's assistant was ill. Wind pushed against my back as I tightened the grounding clamp. The storm broke before I descended. Lightning struck the rod. White light covered the roof. The charge ran through our recovered copper, into the grounding cage, and vanished beneath the academy. The rod held. For the first time, something taken from the graveyard protected the academy again. The ward keeper paid the yard and signed a quality contract for future material. Oren bought a second cart. Mira received permission to use a corner of the forge for salvage testing. I received no public combat title, but the foundation assessment came at the end of the week.
Students carried weighted packs through an obstacle course, held defensive forms under controlled impacts, and crossed a narrow beam while instructors projected heat and noise. A week earlier, I had ranked last. This time, the messenger anklets kept my legs moving. The mining helmet's balance steadied me. The forge glove's heat resistance protected my grip. The shield's defense let me remain standing through the final impact. I finished first. The crowd's reaction lasted less than a minute. My workbench would still be waiting in the morning, and the western lane was only one path through a mountain. After the assessment, I found an envelope pushed beneath the shed door. Inside was a drawing of a sword hilt bearing the crest of House Vale. A short message had been written beneath it. This blade was declared destroyed and sent to your yard. I need to know whether anything remains. The furnace order begins in 3 days. The signature belonged to Lena Vale.
Attached to her note was the Academy's disposal schedule. 300 condemned artifacts would be melted together. If the order went forward, repairable relics would be destroyed. Valuable materials would be mixed into slag, and every surviving property would disappear. Episode 3. Lena arrived before dawn wearing her training uniform and carrying half a sword. The blade ended a hand's width above the guard. The broken edge was old and dark. A sunburst crest had been stamped into the pommel. "This is Dawn," she said. "My family carried it for 6 generations." I looked at the fragment. "It is not in the yard." "This is the hilt from our display case. The remaining blade was stored in the military archive. After my father died, the Academy declared every separated piece worthless." "Can it be repaired?" "Not as it was." That answer mattered. Lena could identify a sword school by the wear on a guard.
She could examine a notch and tell whether it came from poor forging, a sideways block, or an impact against monster bone. She believed the rest of Dawn had been thrown into the graveyard because its blade held the recorded movements of previous owners. If that memory survived, the system might let me absorb it. Lena wanted something else. "I want the blade restored," she said. "If I dismantle it, the remaining property will leave the metal." "Then do not dismantle it." "We have 3 days before the furnace." Her jaw tightened. Dawn was not just material to her. It was the final proof that her family's sword style had existed before the Academy absorbed their land and records. I promised to search before making any decision. The disposal order covered 12 racks, 2 underground bins, and most of the blocked central lane. Sorting everything by hand would take weeks. I tried to turn our small process into a production line. Oren provided rollers from a broken laundry press. Mira built 3 inspection frames from recovered iron. Lena stood at the first table and identified weapon damage. Mira tested material and mana residue at the second. I handled final classification and property-bearing ruins at the third. Repairable items went to green carts, reusable materials went to blue, dangerous objects entered isolated red cradles. Only fully dead artifacts reached my dismantling bench. For a day, it worked. Lena found a dozen weapons that had been condemned for cosmetic damage. Mira discovered star steel in axe heads listed as common iron. I dismantled smaller ruins in carefully separated groups and gained modest properties without losing useful material.
Then I decided we were too slow. I added a suspended feed tray above my bench. A foot lever tipped one object at a time onto a padded surface. The idea was sensible. My execution was not. The tray let the next object enter before I had finished recording the previous one.
Unchecked pieces gathered at the back. I saw the growing line and began trusting old disposal marks instead of repeating every inspection. Near sunset, a blackened command clasp arrived with 3 fragments of military armor. The clasp had been cut in half. The breastplate had a hole through its core. One greave was crushed, and the other had melted along the knee. Every piece had lost its individual function. The system detected stable properties in all of them. I should have wondered why 4 pieces from the same armor set had reached my bench together. Instead, I saw speed. I fixed the breastplate in the vise, removed its straps, and opened the inner plate. A pulse moved through the command clasp waiting behind me. Lena heard it first. "Stop," she said. My chisel had already severed the breastplate's final binding wire. The entire armor set awakened. The pieces could not protect a soldier, but they still recognized one another. Their shared command network remained functional.
By classifying each piece separately, I had misunderstood the object's true primary function. The crushed greave locked around a table leg. The melted knee plate dragged a red cradle from the wall. The command clasp released every stored movement at once. Battle memory struck me from 4 directions. My right leg tried to charge, my left locked in place. My arms raised to protect a body shape larger than mine. Mana from the burned staff surged into the broken armor network. The suspended tray overturned. Artifacts crashed across the shed. A frost plate struck a heat rune. Steam exploded between the tables. Mira pushed the red cradle away before its contents could ignite. A section of the feed frame fell toward her. Lena caught it on her shoulder and drove it aside, but the jagged edge cut through her sleeve. I tried to release the properties. The system gave me nothing. I had completed the transfer. The incompatible commands were mine. My forward leg tore free of the anchoring effect and launched me across the shed. I hit the wall hard enough to crack 2 boards. The command clasp discharged into the sorting rails. Blue fire traveled through our entire line and split Mira's best testing hammer from head to handle. Then everything became still. Lena's cut was shallow. Mira's hammer was not so fortunate. The heat frame had warped, the feed tray had collapsed, and mixed residue covered the floor. Worse, a thread of black static remained inside my mana. Whenever I tried to move quickly, the greave property pulled me in 2 directions. Whenever I reached toward another ruined artifact, the system's pale line flickered red. I could not safely absorb anything else. The furnace deadline was now 2 days away. Mira stared at the remains of her hammer. "You stopped checking." "Yes." "You trusted labels written by people who wanted these objects gone." "Yes." "And you connected every table with the same metal rail." I looked at the burned path across the floor. "Yes." She placed the split hammerhead on my ledger. "Write those down too." She was furious because the mistake had been avoidable. I could not blame the system, the old armor, or the deadline. I had treated 4 related parts as separate pieces because separate pieces moved through the line faster. The cost would not vanish when the shed was repaired. The conflicting properties remained in my body, and Mira no longer trusted me to control the line alone. Lena found the solution before I did. "The armor is repeating a drill," she said. She made me stand in the yard while she watched my involuntary movements. The anchor effect locked my left foot. The charge effect drove from my right. My arms lifted in a heavy shield form. "It belonged to a breach soldier," Lena said. The left greave anchored before impact, the right launched after the shield absorbed force. You took the steps without the timing between them. "How does that help?"
You do not have random properties. You have an unfinished sequence. Mira joined us with copper wire, leather straps, and a replacement hammer borrowed from the forge. She wrapped the wire around my greaves and connected it to 2 separate grounding plates. "If Lena can identify the order, I can keep one property from triggering the other too early," she said. "But you will have to move through the entire drill until the stored command settles." The system could not resolve the conflict. It had given me exactly what I preserved, including the damage created by my careless process. We spent the night rebuilding the missing sequence. Lena demonstrated each step slowly. Anchor, brace, receive force, release the left foot, drive from the right, recover balance. I copied her. The first attempt threw me into a scrap barrel. The second ripped one of Mira's grounding straps. On the third, I anchored too hard and cracked the stone beneath my boot. Lena changed the angle of my knee. Mira added a leather delay between the copper contacts. I learned to feel the moment when defense stopped being resistance and became stored motion. Near dawn, I completed the sequence without falling. The black static did not disappear, but it formed a stable path through my body. The conflicting properties had become parts of one controlled process. A message appeared. A celestial recycler had learned that preserved properties could not merely be collected. They had to be understood, ordered, and made compatible. The hidden class Property Devourer had awakened. The name sounded more frightening than the result felt. I had not gained permission to consume everything. I had gained responsibility for arranging what I already carried. When I focused on a movement, I could feel which preserved properties supported it and which resisted it. That awareness reduced the danger. It did not replace Lena's technique or Mira's material controls. We rebuilt the line differently.
Nothing moved automatically onto my bench. Every object stopped at an isolated wooden station. Related fragments remained together until we understood their shared function. Copper grounding paths ended in separate sand pots instead of connecting the whole workshop. Mira refused to call it efficient. She called it less foolish. By midday, Lena found the first fragment of dawn. It was hidden inside a barrel labeled common blade steel. The star steel surface had been blackened with acid. A sunray pattern remained beneath the discoloration. She found the second piece by examining a shallow notch near the edge. "My grandfather caught a marsh troll's hook here," she said. "He turned the blade instead of meeting the blow." The third fragment lay beneath broken spearheads. Someone had drilled through its central rune line before disposal. Mira examined the hole. This was not battle damage. Lena's face went still. The Academy records claimed Dawn had been too damaged to preserve.
The blade had actually been disabled on purpose. We assembled the fragments on a clean cloth. Dawn could never function as its original sword again. The drilled rune path had destroyed its continuous channel. Its edge existed in separate lengths. Reforging could reuse the star steel, but it could not restore the memories while they remained trapped in broken wire. The system detected one stable property, the memory of 1,000 practiced strikes. Lena stood beside the table for a long time. "If you take it, will the memory be gone from the blade?" she asked. "Yes." "Will you understand the strikes?" "Not automatically. I received a breech drill and nearly destroyed the shed." That produced a small, unwilling smile. She touched the damaged sunburst crest. "Then we do this carefully." Mira removed the guard and pommel for preservation. She heated the blade fragments only enough to soften the resin holding the memory wire. Too much heat would erase the recorded movements. I used fine pliers to lift the wire from the first groove. Each bend held the echo of a hand position. Each crossing marked a transition. Lena named the forms while I worked. High sun, turning ray, low horizon, returning light. At the 17th crossing, I pulled too firmly. The wire began to stretch. Lena caught my wrist. "Do not fight the turn," she said. "Follow it."
She guided my hand through the curve. The wire rose without deforming. We continued until morning. The final piece was thinner than hair. It ran beneath the drilled hole where someone had tried to destroy it. I scraped away the burned resin grain by grain, supported the wire on paper, and lifted it free. The memory entered me. 1,000 strikes did not become instant mastery. They arrived as weight, angle, resistance, and correction. I felt old mistakes beside later improvements. I knew how the blade had moved, but my muscles still needed to reproduce those movements with my own body.
Lena spent an hour making sure I understood that distinction. Then, Mira melted the cleaned star steel fragments in 3 separate charges. She removed the contaminated sections, folded the usable metal around a new rune spine, and forged a narrower blade suited to Lena's current reach. I worked the bellows and prepared each recovered component. Lena tested balance after every grinding pass. The finished sword was not the old Dawn. Its steel was shorter. Its rune held no ancestral memory. The original pommel looked worn against the new blade. Lena raised it beneath the morning light and completed the first form. The edge made one clear sound. "Dawn returned," Mira said. Lena lowered the blade. "No, this one is morning." She thanked Mira first. Then she turned to me. "You kept the memory alive," she said. "Now you will help me learn it back." That became our agreement. I carried the preserved record. Lena possessed the skill to interpret it. Neither of us could restore her family's art alone. We completed the disposal audit an hour before the furnace order. More than half the condemned artifacts contained repairable parts. Mira's material records stopped them from being melted. The Academy Forge bought the recovered alloys. The ward keeper ordered more conductors. My permanent properties grew again, but more slowly and safely. Each new one entered a compatibility section in my ledger. I no longer counted them only as gains. I recorded what they resisted, what activated them, and who had helped me understand them. Then Oren opened the final underground bin. The floor beneath it collapsed. Dust rolled through the yard. Broken armor slid into a chamber hidden below the chute. At the bottom stood a black throne. It had no legs. Half its back was missing, and a blade had been driven through the seat. By every normal measure, it was ruined. The system's pale line appeared, then recoiled from it. The throne had lost its shape. It had not lost its function. Something in the darkness beneath us was still obeying it. Episode 4. The next morning, Iris Dane arrived with the deed to the graveyard. She wore a traveling coat, carried 3 document cases, and looked more offended by the yard's accounting than by the demon throne beneath it. "My family owns this land," she said. "Argent Academy leases the upper salvage yard and pretends the lower vault does not exist." Oren folded his arms. "Your family has not inspected the site in 12 years. "My father tried. The Reclamation Guild blocked his permits. He disappeared 6 months later." That ended the argument. Iris was the only daughter of Dane Reclamation, a company that had once processed war ruins across the kingdom. She had inherited its debts, damaged reputation, and sealed archives. She also knew why legendary artifacts had been declared rubbish. After the Demon War, certain artifacts continued to obey dead rulers, broken oaths, and vanished armies. Destroying them often released the authority inside. Repairing them risked restoring their original commands. So the Crown created a third category: forgotten property. Artifacts placed in that category were stripped from public records, legally abandoned, and buried beneath layers of ordinary scrap. The graveyard had not grown randomly. It had been built as a lid. The throne belonged to the last Demon King, Iris said. Not his ceremonial throne, his field seat. Commanders placed captured banners and weapons before it. It gave orders to anything considered spoils of war.
Lena looked down through the collapsed floor. Why does it still function? Iris picked up a rusted Academy breastplate. What is this? Scrap, I said. She picked up a broken spearhead. And this? Scrap. She pointed toward the mountain. Every object here has been declared abandoned. The throne rules abandoned artifacts. The kingdom has spent decades feeding its subjects. The answer made horrible sense.
The throne's wood had rotted. Its seat was pierced. It could no longer support a king. But its primary function was authority over forgotten objects, and the entire graveyard still fulfilled that function. I could not dismantle it for its surviving property until it truly stopped being a throne. At noon, Master Corvin of the Reclamation Guild arrived with 20 workers and an incineration order. He was not a sneering noble or a fool in polished armor. He had burn scars across both hands and knew exactly what waited below us. "Close the yard," he told Iris. "We will build the containment wall and reduce the upper material to inert slag." "That will destroy thousands of reusable objects," she said. "It will also deny the throne an army." Mira showed him our material ledgers. Lena showed him Dawn's drilled rune. I explained that heat could release properties instead of destroying them. Corvin listened. Then he examined the collapsed bin and pointed toward moving fragments below. "You have days, perhaps hours, before the throne extends its command into the upper piles. Your careful sorting process handles dozens of objects. There are tens of thousands here." He was right about the scale. His solution would cost a fortune, poison the western ground, and destroy valuable material. It might also work. Iris offered another option. "If abandoned status gives the throne authority, we revoke that status." Corvin shook his head. "You cannot change a magical function with paperwork." "Not paperwork alone." Iris opened the first document case. It contained old Dane reclamation methods. Before the Crown created forgotten property vaults, reclaimers did more than collect scrap. They inspected every object, assigned it a recoverable purpose, marked ownership, and physically began that recovery. A cracked sword became repair stock. A dead wand became silver, crystal, and fuel. A shattered statue became building stone. Once an object entered a real production chain, it was no longer forgotten. We did not need to dismantle every item before the throne awakened. We needed to inspect, claim, separate, and assign every item to a controlled purpose. Then we had to complete enough of those purposes to make the claim real. Corvin considered the proposal. "If you fail," he said, "the incineration team may not have time to contain the result." "Then remain and prepare your wall," Iris replied. "Give us until the next sunset." He agreed because his goal was containment, not victory over us. We had one day to turn the graveyard into a working reclamation enterprise. Iris became the organizer we had never known we needed. She divided the yard into mapped sectors, matched old disposal manifests to physical racks, and found buyers for material before we processed it. A town north of the Academy needed iron braces after a flood. The wardkeeper wanted copper. The forge wanted sorted steel. A glassmaker would buy clean mana crystal if we could guarantee it carried no active command. Ownership without purpose would not break the throne's authority. Real orders gave every claimed material a destination. Mira redesigned the inspection stations. She placed heat-sensitive goods under tile roofs, cursed metal on stone, and ordinary armor on raised wooden racks. She trained Orin's workers to perform spark tests, file tests, and residue checks without approaching my dismantling bench. Lena mapped safe movement through unstable piles. She found load paths I had missed and marked every piece that could trigger a slide. When fragments below began twitching toward the throne, she did not attack them. She pinned their joints with wooden wedges so the command could not move them without breaking its own material. I built the processing center. The old shed was too small, so we opened both walls and extended the roof with repaired shield frames. We set heavy dismantling vices along one side. Wash troughs and material bins stood along the other.
The central feature was a suspended rail made from recovered spear shafts and cartwheels. Unlike my failed feed tray, the rail did not deliver objects automatically. Each hook stopped at an inspection gate. A worker had to confirm the object's identity, danger, and next purpose before releasing it. I also built isolation gaps into every metal path. Leather straps and dry wooden blocks prevented one artifact's command from traveling through the entire line. Mira tested each gap with a charged rod. The first 3 failed. Blue sparks crossed damp wood, jumped between 2 close hooks, and traveled through a worker's measuring chain. We widened the gaps, replaced wet supports, and hung measuring tools on separate pegs. The 4th test held. By evening, the graveyard sounded less like a tomb and more like a workshop. Hammers tapped pins from hinges. Saws cut reusable lengths of wood. Files exposed clean metal beneath corrosion. Carts rolled toward buyers' lots. I stood at the final bench and dismantled only objects that had no repair path. A broken ward plate gave me resistance to pressure. A ruined lifting charm increased the weight I could control. A shattered survey lens sharpened my ability to judge straight lines. I used those properties immediately, but never alone. The lifting charm helped me steady a beam while workers placed its supports. The survey lens let me see that the rail sagged, but Iris calculated the load and Mira chose the brace material. Near midnight, we took our first rest. Mira boiled water on a small forge stove. Lena sat on an overturned helmet while cleaning black dust from mourning. Iris used a stack of old shields as a desk and continued writing sales receipts. The workshop roof clicked as it cooled. "You know," I said, "most students celebrate reaching first place somewhere without a view of demon furniture." Lena accepted a cup from Mira. "Most students are unambitious." Mira handed me water. Our fingers touched through layers of soot. "You are shaking," she said. "I have processed 42 items. You are stopping at 42. The throne may not respect working hours. I do." Lena looked at the tremor in my hand and supported Mira's decision. Iris moved the next batch out of reach. It was a small moment, but it changed something. They were not assistants waiting for my orders. Each protected a part of the work, including the part represented by my exhausted hands. I slept for 1 hour beneath the bench. When I woke, Iris had found the hidden manifests. Her father's notes revealed that the crown had continued adding legendary artifacts to forgotten property vaults long after the war. Some were dangerous, others had been condemned because their owners opposed the Reclamation Guild's monopoly. Dawn was listed among them.
So was Mira's missing masterwork furnace core, an invention her old teacher had supposedly destroyed after a failed test. The throne was both a prison and a convenient excuse. Iris's family had helped build the system. Her grandfather believed he was preventing another war. Her father later discovered the guild was abusing it and tried to expose the records. "If I release these," Iris said, "Dane Reclamation may lose every royal contract." "If you hide them, the guild keeps doing it," Lena replied. "I know." Iris signed the first public copy and gave it to Oren for delivery to the Academy Council. She chose the truth over the company she had inherited. Then she returned to the manifests and used them to locate the most dangerous sectors. Before dawn, our buyers began collecting completed orders. Flood braces left on a heavy cart. The ward keeper claimed copper coils. Repairable armor returned to the Academy stores with the old disposal marks crossed out. Every completed sale weakened the throne's hold. We could see the change below. At first, hundreds of fragments had leaned toward the black seat. As our reclaimed material left the yard, pieces dropped from its invisible command one by one. Then, Corvin discovered a problem. The oldest layer did not belong to the Academy or Dane Reclamation. It had been abandoned by royal decree. Iris could claim the physical material, but ancient command seals still defined it as spoils of the Demon King. The throne retained a foundation of subjects beneath the yard. Corvin ordered his workers to begin the containment wall. We cleared the collapsed bin and descended into the lower vault. The air smelled of cold iron and old smoke. Broken weapons covered the floor in rings around the throne. Many had been deliberately snapped, drilled, or burned. Black threads connected their remaining command runes to the seat. Lena found the cut pattern first. "These were disabled by the same blade," she said.
Every break points inward. Mira touched one thread with a ceramic probe. The command passes through the damage. Whoever destroyed them made the throne stronger. Iris found the royal seal carved beneath the dust. The old decree did not merely abandon the artifacts, it granted the throne custody over them. Paperwork had become magic because thousands of people had enforced it for generations. We could not wait for a court to reverse the decree. We had to change the objects so completely and usefully that the decree no longer described them. I designed the final process on the vault floor. Lena would separate the rings without allowing their command lines to tighten. Mira would neutralize residue and identify which objects could be repaired. Iris would assign every recovered part to an order, structure, tool, or recorded stock lot. I would dismantle the irreparable command cores and absorb their properties one controlled family at a time.
The recovered material would feed the workshop above. Some of it would become braces for the containment wall. Some would become tools for the next stage. Nothing would remain abandoned. We opened the first ring. The black threads tightened. The throne's broken back rose by the width of a finger. Behind us, the stone door slammed shut. Mira's test flame turned black. Lena's wooden wedges began snapping. Every loose artifact in the vault dragged itself toward the throne. The process had begun. If we stopped now, the opened command ring would join the throne permanently, and everything we had reclaimed above would become its first target. Episode 5. The throne pulled at the vault like a heart trying to gather iron blood. Sword fragments scraped across stone. Broken helmets rolled toward the center. A chain with no hook whipped around my boot. I did not draw a weapon. I drove my sorting hook through the chain's largest link, twisted it sideways, and pinned it beneath a stone block.
"First ring stays separated," I said. "Nothing crosses the chalk line." Lena moved along the circle with mourning. She did not fight the animated fragments. She cut old leather straps, kicked wooden wedges beneath rolling pieces, and turned spearheads so their command threads wrapped around ceramic posts. Mira opened 2 bags of forge sand across the floor. The black threads dimmed where the grains covered them. "Commands travel through the metal and old blood resin," she said. "Keep iron pieces apart, wood and ceramic between every lot." Iris stood beside the sealed door with a manifest board. "First order is containment braces," she said. "Second is repair stock. Third is certified alloy. Property cores go to Kai only after both inspectors reject repair." Even with the throne moving, she required 2 people to confirm that an item had truly lost its primary function. That rule slowed us. It also saved a Royal Ward blade, whose broken-looking hilt still projected a usable barrier.
Mira sent it to the repair cradle instead of my bench. The moment Iris assigned it to the academy wall and marked the first restoration step, its black command thread vanished. We did not have to destroy the throne's subjects. We had to give them futures. The first ring contained military tools. Most were ruined beyond repair, but their materials remained useful. I locked a broken command horn in a floor vise. Its bell had melted, and its sound channel had collapsed. The remaining property was coordination. I removed the silver rim, softened the old resin with controlled heat, and separated the cracked voice plate from the bronze shell. The property entered me. Hundreds of moving sounds in the vault became easier to distinguish. I could hear which chain scraped because the throne pulled it, and which hook moved because a worker touched it above. I used that awareness to direct the process,
but Iris still controlled the order board. A destroyed quartermaster's seal gave me a sense for stored weight after I cut away its lead face and lifted the balance rune intact. I used it to stop workers overloading the rail. A broken siege gauge improved my pressure judgment. It revealed that the vault's western support was carrying too much force. None of those properties solved the problem alone. They gave me better information. We still had to respond with wood, iron, rope, wedges, heat, and careful hands. The throne changed tactics. It pulled 3 related spear fragments from different lots and joined their command lines across the floor. The pieces rose like the bones of one weapon. Lena stepped toward them. "Do not break them," I said. "That may strengthen the command." "I know." She struck the floor instead. Morning's tip drove a wooden wedge between the spear socket and its black thread. Lena turned the fragment through the exact angle preserved in Dawn's 1,000 strikes.
The command line twisted around itself and went slack. I recognized the movement. "Turning ray," I said. "My version," she replied. She was learning her family style back from the memory I carried, but she was no longer copying it. She adjusted the old forms to her new blade and her own body. We sent the spearhead to Mira. She found that its edge could be reforged into 3 masonry chisels. Iris assigned those chisels to the containment crew. When the first finished chisel struck the wall above, the spear's thread disappeared completely. The production chain itself had become our weapon. Hours passed. The upper workshop received material, processed it, and sent completed goods back down. Recovered oak became isolation blocks. Bronze shells became rail bearings. Armor plate became wall braces. Mira found her teacher's furnace core in the second ring. It was a dark red cylinder with one side crushed and cooling channels drilled through the center.
The guild record called it a failed heat regulator. Mira brushed away the dust. "My teacher said this melted during testing."
"It did not," I said.
"No, someone crushed the valve afterward."
The core could no longer regulate a furnace in its current shape, but its inner alloy remained intact. The system detected a powerful stability property. It would have been useful to me. I stepped away from the bench. "Repairable?" I asked. Mira examined it for several minutes. She measured the crushed wall, tested the alloy with a file, and warmed the inner channel. "Yes," she said. "Not easily." "Then it is yours." The system's line vanished when we placed the core in her repair cradle. Mira looked at me across the work lamp. "You did not hesitate." "I did. I simply finished hesitating before I spoke." She laughed, then pressed her soot-covered forehead briefly against my shoulder. It lasted only a moment. After that, she began designing a new valve. The repaired core could regulate our forge more accurately than any Academy equipment. Once Mira gave it a new casing and connected the first cooling pipe, another black thread vanished from the throne. By midday, the second ring was clear. The sealed door opened enough for Oren to pass water and food through the gap. Corvin's wall had reached half height. He had stopped preparing to burn the entire yard and started using our certified iron. "You have until nightfall," he warned. "The throne's authority is gathering in the central seal." We entered the third ring. These were personal artifacts: house blades, oath rings, command medals, and broken crowns. Many had been disabled deliberately. Lena found the crest of another erased sword family. Iris found proof that the guild had condemned tools belonging to independent reclaimers. Each discovery made the work more important and more dangerous.
Returning an artifact to repair stock weakened the throne, but exposing its origin threatened powerful people. Iris recorded everything. At one point, she held a royal disposal seal over the forge flame. "If I burn this, no one can prove my grandfather signed the first transfer," she said. Lena continued sorting without looking up. "And no one can prove the guild changed its purpose later." Mira tightened a vise. "Metal remembers heat. Paper remembers ink.
Families should be allowed to remember mistakes. Iris lowered the seal. She assigned it to the Public Evidence Archive. The throne lost another subject. The third ring fought us through conflicting properties. A frost crown cooled the wash trough until its water became ice. A ruined sun medallion heated the same rail from the other side. If their effects met, the rail would crack and drop an entire load into the central seal. My old mistake had taught us what to do. We did not try to overpower either property.
Mira isolated the crown in a sand-lined ceramic box. Lena cleared the path between stations. Iris redirected the sun medallion into the order for the forge's new heat cage. I dismantled the frost crown only after Mira confirmed its circlet could not be repaired. I removed each silver tooth in alternating order, so the cold pressure remained balanced. The final blue stone surrendered resistance to freezing. The sun medallion still had a usable heating face, so we preserved it. Different answers for different objects. That was the heart of reclamation. Near sunset, only the central ring remained. The throne stood higher now, assembled from its own black threads. Broken pieces had moved into the gaps of its back. A crown-shaped command seal glowed beneath the pierced seat. Around it lay 9 artifacts whose authority had never been legally or physically separated. Iris read their names from the oldest manifest. A gate key, a judge's chain, a battlefield banner clasp, a tribute bowl, a prison lock, a tax rod, a general's badge, a broken crown, a king's execution sword. They were not merely possessions. They represented parts of rule. The Demon King's throne used them to define its function. "We cannot assign these to ordinary buyers," Iris said. "Their purpose is authority." "Then we separate authority from material," I said. The throne pulled the central ring inward. The containment wall above groaned. I started with the gate key. Its teeth had melted together, so it could no longer open its gate. The surviving property was permission to pass barriers. I locked it in the vise, cut away its ornamental shell, and filed the fused teeth until the internal ward pin emerged. The key resisted every stroke. Heat climbed through the file. When I removed the ward pin, the property entered me. The sealed vault door no longer felt like one wall. I sensed its hinges, latch, stone pressure, and the small open path around Oren's water pipe.
I used that information to guide workers reinforcing the doorway. The judge's chain had lost every link required to form a full collar. It preserved the weight of judgment. I separated its remaining links one at a time, but the property pressed doubt into my mind. Who had given me the right to decide which objects deserved repair? I stopped. The system offered no answer. I looked at Mira repairing a tool instead of surrendering its stability to me. I watched Lena return family histories to the evidence cases. I watched Iris sign her own company's guilt into the public record. I had not made every decision alone. That was the answer. I finished the chain with all 3 of them beside the bench. The battlefield clasp released command range. The tribute bowl released an instinct for value, but only after Iris taught me to separate its silver lining without destroying the maker's marks. The prison lock gave resistance to restraint.
The tax rod gave nothing because corruption had consumed every stable property inside it. Not every symbol of power deserved preservation. The general's badge still functioned as identification, so we did not dismantle it. Iris assigned it to a war museum, and its black thread disappeared. The broken crown could not be worn, but its stones were intact. Mira removed them for historical preservation. I dismantled only the dead command frame and received a small ability to keep my collected properties from reacting without permission. The execution sword was last. Its blade had been shattered into black pieces, but the handle still tried to order every weapon in the vault to kill. Lena could not approach it without mourning trembling. "We cannot destroy it by force," she said. "We will not." We fixed every blade fragment in a separate wooden jaw. Mira heated the command wire until its resin softened. Iris read the old legal formula carved along the tang and replaced each claimed word with a new destination. Blade steel for wall tools, silver for the evidence seals, leather for protective grips, black crystal for an isolated research vault. I removed the fragments in the reverse order of assembly. Lena guided the turns when the wire tried to tighten. Mira controlled the temperature. Iris marked each separated material as active stock. The handle gave one final command. Every sword in the graveyard turned toward us. Then I lifted the command wire from the pommel. The weapons fell. The property that entered me was not skill with a sword. It was resistance to imposed command. It settled beside the prison lock and judge's chain, compatible because we had understood what each meant before the transfer. The central artifacts were gone. The throne's black threads faded. Its broken back collapsed. The pieces filling its gaps dropped onto the floor.
The command seal beneath the seat cracked from center to edge. For the first time, the system's pale line remained steady around the throne. Its primary function had been completely lost. A vast, preserved property remained. We had reached the object that could turn me from a skilled reclaimer into something much more dangerous. The throne offered authority, not through words, through possibility. I could feel every ruined artifact in the workshop above. With the throne's property, I might command them before dismantling. I could force armor to walk onto the line, make tools separate themselves, and build an enterprise where no worker was needed. It was exactly the kind of power that would perform the labor for me. It was also the same mistake that had created the graveyard. Forgotten objects had been treated as subjects instead of materials with histories, dangers, and possible futures. "We dismantle it," I said, "but we do not preserve its command over abandoned objects." "Can you choose?" Lena asked. "I can choose what physical path survives until the end." Mira examined the throne. Its command property traveled through black crown wire beneath the seat, but other properties remained in the frame. Endurance from surviving centuries, order from coordinating distant parts, and responsibility bound into the central seal. If we cut the crown wire first, uncontrolled authority would discharge into the vault. If we left it until last, I might absorb the exact command we wanted to destroy. We needed a third route. Iris placed the completed reclamation ledger on the throne. "Authority depends on recognized ownership and purpose," she said. "We have reclaimed everything it ruled." Mira connected the crown wire to the repaired furnace core. "The core can hold the discharge stable." Lena placed mourning across the cracked seal. "And I can cut the link when you expose it." I began with the throne's outer frame. The wood had become harder than coal. I used a fine saw, following cracks rather than cutting across them. Each removed section went to an isolated tray. Beneath the wood lay ash iron ribs. Their rivets had been driven from alternating sides to trap tension. I cleaned each head, supported the opposite face, and used my straightest punch. The first rivet moved. The second released a burst of cold wind. The third jammed halfway. I almost struck harder. Instead, I remembered the cracked shield and changed the brace angle. Lena held the frame against the stored twist. Mira warmed the rib by a few careful degrees. The rivet slid free. We removed the velvet, springs, iron ribs, and broken backplates. The throne became smaller, but the crown wire grew brighter. The repaired furnace core shook as it accepted the discharge. Mira's new valve began to bend. "Faster!" Corvin shouted from the doorway. Cracks spread through the containment wall. "Not faster," Mira said. "Cleaner."
She reinforced the valve with a strip cut from the old skycopper heat cage. The material from our first commission carried the excess charge into the ground. At the center of the seat, I found the original command knot. It resembled 9 wires braided around a black nail. Each wire corresponded to one kind of authority represented by the central artifacts. I separated them in the same order we had reclaimed those objects: passage, judgment, command, value, restraint, identity, sovereignty, punishment, ownership. The black nail remained. It held the Demon King's personal authority, but it no longer connected to any subject. The throne could command nothing. Its authority had become responsibility without obedience. I pulled the nail. Lena cut the empty crown wire. Mira closed the furnace valve. Iris stamped the final page of the ledger. The throne's surviving property entered me. It did not give me servants, it gave me order among the properties I had earned.
The shield's defense, the staff's mana, Dawn's memory, the breach armor's movement, the gate key's passage, and hundreds of smaller traits settled into places where I could call on them without letting one crush another. A final message appeared. The Forgotten had not been conquered. They had been examined, reclaimed, and given value. The hidden class, King of Forgotten Artifacts, had awakened. The vault became silent. Above us, the last abandoned helmet rolled away from the throne and stopped beside a repair pallet. The finished result was not only inside me. The graveyard no longer existed as a dump. 2 days later, a new sign stood over its repaired gate. Dane Reclamation Workshop. Mira ran the testing forge with her restored furnace core. She trained smiths to identify repairable objects before they reached the dismantling line. Lena led artifact history and recovery.
Morning hung at her side, and every week we practiced another sequence from Dawn's 1,000 strikes until she transformed the old memory into a living style. Iris managed contracts, ownership records, and the public archive. Her evidence ended the automatic furnace orders and opened an investigation into the Reclamation Guild. Corvin testified in support of safer reclamation standards and became our first independent inspector. My bench remained at the center. I still used the sorting hook Oren had given me, though Mira replaced its cracked handle and added a proper grip. I still cleaned rivets, checked tension, and wrote every mistake in my ledger. Hundreds of permanent properties had raised me from last place to first, but the workshop was the greater result. Flooded towns received braces. Academy students recovered family tools. Dangerous artifacts entered isolated research instead of mixed furnaces. Buyers paid for certified material, and that money bought wages, roofs, carts, and better safety equipment. Nothing appeared instantly. Every improvement had an invoice, a tool mark, and someone responsible for checking it. One evening after the workers left, Mira brought 3 cups of tea to my bench. Lena arrived from practice. Iris locked the archive and placed a new contract in front of us. For once, nobody argued about my working hours. Then I read the contract. It was not a purchase order. It was a map. The royal manifests described 13 forgotten property vaults across the kingdom. The graveyard had been only one. Several were larger, and all had received legendary artifacts condemned under the same decrees. At the map's northern edge, someone had drawn a black crown over an abandoned fortress. A message had appeared beneath it in fresh ink, though the document was older than any of us. The field throne had been reclaimed. The first crown was now awake. Far beneath the northern mountains, thousands of discarded artifacts were waiting for someone to decide whether they were rubbish, prisoners, or material for a new future. I closed the ledger and reached for my sorting hook.